Weapons have existed as long as humankind. For millennia, they have determined the destiny of generations. Weapons bring suffering and death. They show what humans can inflict upon other humans. But they're also intended to keep the peace and pave new ways for technology. Ambush the enemy, surprise them. Insidious but efficient. Strategies that have determined the outcome of wars and have been employed for centuries. We will present 3 weapons used in attacks from cover. Astonishing experiments reveal their secrets. The landmine, perfidious and invisible.
Stop! You're in a minefield! Stop!
The Dreyse gun increases the rate of fire.
It transforms the way the rest of the world looks at infantry firepower.
Particularly perilous for cavalry, caltrops.
You can't smell them, you don't know where they are, you don't know how many they are. That's Russian roulette.
The Romans were using caltrops as early as 2,000 years ago. Why are they so feared? Since horses were domesticized, they became an integral part of battles. Infantry soldiers are hardly a match for armed riders.
The problem for infantry when they face cavalry is the speed with which the cavalry move and the weight they bring to contact.
The impact of a cavalry attack can decide the fate of an entire war.
And it takes a lot of discipline to make foot soldiers stand when they're being charged by horsemen.
The mobility and speed of cavalry attacks pose problems. Ancient military leaders are trying to find more efficient weapons to counter the attacks. A tool known as the caltrop proves to be an ingenious solution. Weapons expert Mike Loades wants to take a closer look at the small weapon. How were caltrops deployed on the battlefield?
Well, this vicious matrix of iron spikes, it's called a caltrop. And they were used on the ancient and medieval battlefield in their thousands, scattered all over the field. The thing about them is that when you throw them, they land spike up. They're always going to land with one of these spikes sticking up. So anybody walking through long grass can't see this, and their foot drives through the spike. This one's got a barb, so very difficult to get out. Vicious against horses, kind of medieval minefield.
On horseback, soldiers can hardly see the caltrops. If used correctly, they can cause deep injuries for both humans and animals.
Je schwerer, desto tiefer bohrt sich dieser.
The heavier, the deeper the spikes drive into the skin. This is particularly dangerous for cavalry horses. And of course, speed plays into it. If I'm moving fast, the spike is going to impale the foot or the hoof, and that immobilizes you.
Dann kann man sich erstmal gar nicht weiter bewegen.
217 CE, Roman infantry soldiers are fighting the heavily armed Parthian riders in the Battle of Nisibis. As the horsemen gallop towards them, the Romans fake a retreat and scatter triboli on the battlefield, the Roman version of the caltrop. They consist of 4 sharp iron spikes. Roman triboli have barbs, which are less common on their medieval counterparts.
In those situations, the caltrop can be very useful to control the terrain. You can create dead ground where no one can go, and that can prevent a flanking attack or the enemy coming round behind. So the caltrop is useful to control the ground.
Triboli slow down cavalry attacks in the most insidious and efficient manner, often causing great losses for both men and horses. Triboli or caltrops are easy to make. Every blacksmith can forge them. Jens Christiansen shows us how. He only has to heat a piece of iron that has been prepared beforehand, bend the ends to achieve the intended form, and forge the spikes. That's it. The defensive weapon is ready for use.
What a terrible, terrible thing. So this is the Roman version, the tribulus. The barbs are intimidating. If that goes through your foot, or certainly a horse's foot, that man is out of action, that horse is out of action forever. So by the Middle Ages, they had dispensed with these barbs, and the tribulus became the caltrop. It's the same thing, different name, but without the barbs.
Triboli are part of the standard equipment of the Roman legions. For horses, stepping on a caltrop usually marks their doom. The most important animals in military history are particularly vulnerable along the underside of their hooves. Horses play a decisive factor in winning wars through to the 20th century. German forces alone lost about 1.5 million horses during World War I. Ever since men have been waging wars, animals have been among the victims. They are often the first ones to die, be it in the front lines or when transporting weapons, ammunition, or food.
Cannon siege engines have been pulled by oxen rather than by horses. And the great advantage of the ox is when he's finished his job, you can eat him. So animals are also a critical part of the food chain, and the fact that they're mobile means it's easier to move an animal food supply than it is a vegetable food supply, which needs animals to tow it.
Even elephants are used in World War I. The most famous of them is a lady. In Sheffield, Lizzie takes over the work from the horses in the steel industry after those have been deployed to the front lines. Hannibal's legendary crossing of the Alps was accompanied by 37 elephants. To this day, it remains unclear how many of them froze to death or fell down the mountain slopes. Dogs are also deployed to the front lines in World War I. Most of them serve as watchdogs, detection dogs, or rescue dogs. They play a crucial role for the troops. A short moment with the animals can already have a huge impact on the soldiers' morale. Stubby, a Boston and Bull Terrier mix, becomes famous. He saves his regiment from mustard gas attacks, finds artillery grenades and wounded soldiers. To this day, animals are used in the military. Sea lions and about 70 dolphins are currently serving in the US Navy. Their mission, finding mines and enemy combat divers. They undergo special training to learn how to mark and report their targets. Their great military value often makes animals a target for the enemy. For horses, stepping onto a caltrop often means receiving the coup de grace. In battle, soldiers neither have the time nor sympathy for a wounded animal. Mike Loades wants to find out if caltrops are really that easy to deploy.
And what I want to find out is, in a field of caltrops, what's the Russian roulette? What's the chance of a cavalryman getting through? We've got these sponges soaked in blue paint, and I'm going to hide them in the grass here so the horses can't see them. Get them well covered.
Mike Loades distributes our dummy caltrops across a staked-off plot.
If you were doing it in the Middle Ages, you would just simply be throwing them out as you walk back. You could get it done really quite quickly.
At top speed, 4 horsemen will try to cross the field unharmed.
You can also see underneath on a horse's foot how vulnerable it is. Look, this is soft. This is where the spike of a caltrop would go in. Really cruel weapon.
Can the horses cross the whole area at full speed and escape unscathed?
Action!
caltrops are invisible to a galloping horse and its rider. In our experiment, of course, we make sure no animal is harmed. The worst that can happen are some color stains. But in war, stepping on a caltrop would mean game over for the horse, and often also for the rider.
Okay, let's have a look. I can see straight away that Absalom has fallen victim to a caltrop. Look at that. You can see the streak of blue down his leg. The horse would be down, the rider would be thrown, they're out of the battle. Look at that. On his hind leg, this horse as well has stepped on a sponge, which means he would have stepped on a caltrop. Look at that. That's... Even being this wet, I think there'd be a trace. So maybe you survived. Nothing here. Both hooves are clean. But that's 2 horses out of 4 in that one run got struck by caltrops. Imagine if you're in a cavalry charge and your fellows go down and you know, the cry would go up, caltrops! It would take a brave man or a foolish man to ride their horse through there. That's Russian roulette.
Our experiment has shown there is no protection against a caltrop attack. Nevertheless, the weapon can harm both friend and foe. One of the few historical depictions of documenting the use of caltrops is a mural in the chapel of Schönenbuchen in southern Germany. It depicts mercenaries on a raid in the Black Forest in 1444. Farmers are trying to stop them with caltrops.
You put baskets of caltrops on a mountain pass that's the only way to get to your town, then you decimate an army before it arrives. You put baskets of caltrops through a woodland causeway, then you cause chaos in an attacking army. You don't even have to fight them.
Are there only just a few historical depictions of caltrops because they are considered dishonorable weapons? Regardless, over the course of history, millions of them have been manufactured. And the ingenuity of medieval weapon engineers will bring more ideas to light.
The caltrop is a silent assassin. It hides and waits for its victims. But sometimes it's used more actively. We actually have evidence of caltrops in clay pots, pots that could be dropped from the height of city walls or castles. But you would think that once the pot smashed and these caltrops were on the ground, everyone would know where they were. They would know it was a minefield. But there was something else in the pot.
When the pots break, not only caltrops cover the battlefield. The result is one of the first chemical weapons of history.
The other ingredient in the pot of caltrops was quicklime. Quicklime's used in building materials, mortar, cement. This is it when it's set. This is now inert. But before it's inert, it's a very, very dangerous substance in powder form. That's why, for this demonstration, we're using flour, not the real thing. Quicklime is made from crushed seashells and limestone that are then heated to a very, very high temperature. And then you get this substance that reacts with water, reacts with any moisture, and it has a rapid acceleration in temperature, and it burns like acid.
The clay pots filled with caltrops proved to be a particularly efficient defensive weapon in sieges.
You got it? Good.
Sometimes medieval defendants used in the upwards of several hundred clay pots.
This was really quicklime. It would be a scene of true terror. This dust would be getting down the back, behind your armor. You couldn't get at it. It would be getting in your eyes. Everything would be stinging, and you would be blinded.
Quicklime is completely caustic for humans. It's basically an acid and causes extremely bad chemical burns. It's also highly flammable, so if in addition to the caltrops and quicklime you add other highly flammable substances, you can effortlessly make it all catch fire.
This stuff, if it's quicklime, touching the moisture in your eyes would burn your eyes out, and you could not see, and you would stand on the caltrops.
This always caught the enemy off guard, slowed down attacks on the battlefield, or prevented them altogether. The fact that caltrops are so easy to manufacture makes them a cheap and mass-produced defensive weapon. They remain important even when motor vehicles are introduced. Modern caltrops and their variations, like spike strips, destroy car tires even today. Police all around the globe use them. They are one of the few weapons in history that have been deployed almost unaltered since the Roman era. Our next weapon is also used to ambush the enemy. But unlike caltrops, it is suitable for both offense and defense. The Dreyse Needle Gun. July 3, 1866, Königgrätz, northern Bohemia. 440,000 soldiers of the two most powerful states in the German Confederation are facing each other in battle. Whoever wins this war will win the fight for the hegemony and power over the future of what we know today as Germany. The Austrian troops are armed with traditional muzzle loaders, which have a long reach. On the other side, Prussian soldiers, equipped with state-of-the-art breech-loading guns. These weapons will revolutionize warfare in Europe. Weapons expert Wolfgang Staber wants to test this wonder weapon from 1866 for us. What makes the needle gun so innovative?
A fascinating weapon. It's amazing what it can do.
In the 16th century, the musket becomes the standard weapon of infantry. Compared to its predecessor, the shooting range is especially long. But muskets and all other muzzleloaders have one major downside.
Muzzle loaders are the original firearm. You have a muzzle that's closed on one end. It's loaded with black powder or another type of explosive, and then the projectile. The problem is, you always have to lean over the firearm to reload it. Everything needs to be rammed down into the barrel really snugly.
This results in the line formation. All soldiers fire their weapons simultaneously. Cover is not an issue yet, just like camouflage.
Uniforms in the early modern era are very, very colorful because you have to be able to tell apart the various units on the battlefield. This may sound odd at first, but you have to remember that due to the powder dust coming from the musket cells, the air was filled with a thick smoke. As a commander, you need to be able to see where which unit is standing.
How is it possible that soldiers still fight unprotected in the 19th century, clad in colorful uniforms that are easy to spot, and only a few decades later fight each other from the trenches? German inventor Johann Nikolaus von Dreyse has been working on a new gun since 1827. Back then, the ignition of standard weapons was not weatherproof because the wheel locks were placed outside the weapon. In Dreyse's gun, however, the ignition takes place within the wheel lock, with the help of an ignition needle piercing the cartridge. Dreyse builds a cartridge that contains a projectile, a propellant, and black powder all in one piece, which is placed into the muzzle from the rear side of the gun. In 1841, the Prussian army starts buying this gun in large quantities, but it will take another 20 years until its first major debut. Wolfgang Staber is an expert in blasting techniques and historical weapons. To this day, he is fascinated by the development of the Dreyse gun.
The lock system was so revolutionary that it's been copied 1 million times and it's still used today. It would have been impossible to manufacture modern weapons without this crucial invention.
The Dreyse Needle Gun, a breech-loading gun with a cylindrical lock. Firing pin cartridges are used as ammunition. They still have paper cases, but they make it possible to refill the propellant, black powder and projectile with just one movement. Our experiment begins. Is the needle gun really superior to the musket? Wolfgang Staber and another gunman are making preparations.
Which one will fire faster, the Dreyse gun, a breech-loading gun, or the muzzle loader, which is easy to handle? We're about to find out. We've got 1 minute.
Plastic bottles filled with liquid and tins serve as targets. The test is intended to show what the Austrians had to face in 1866 when they encountered the Prussians and their new guns.
Fire at will.
Compared to the Dreyse and its all-in-one cartridge, loading the muzzle is time-consuming. The needle gun clearly has the edge in terms of speed. The minute is over. Wolfgang Staber has managed 3 shots in 60 seconds. One of them hit the target. His opponent only manages to load and fire his gun once.
I was superior by far in terms of rate of fire.
The quick loading and firing of the Dreyse Needle Gun is a game-changer in battlefield tactics. With the help of 2 gotcha teams, Wolfgang Staber wants to demonstrate why.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here today. We're about to conduct a historical experiment. Blue is Prussia, these are the Austrians. It's the battle between a breech-loading system and a muzzle-loader system. Everyone has the same weapons. The Austrians are only allowed to reload once and have to wait 20 to 30 seconds. This is about the time it took a historical muzzle-loader to reload. The Prussians are allowed to reload once, fire, reload once, fire.
Team Orange has to fire together and load while standing, just as the musketeers had to do until the middle of the 19th century. Team Blue may now take cover.
Attention everyone, get ready, 3, 2, 1.
Being able to fire faster and to take cover to reload. The benefits of the needle gun should be quite obvious during our test.
How real. Just imagine how muzzleloaders used to shoot back in the days. They all fired their guns at the same time. It maybe took a well-trained shooter 20 seconds to fire 1 shot. They're an easy target.
Hit! 1 man down.
Team Blue is still intact, 0 hits. They're bending down and are much harder to hit. Oh, this doesn't look good at all for them.
Oh, come on, hit him!
Team Blue wins. Team Orange doesn't stand the slightest chance against the attack from cover.
Team
Blue was significantly faster. They could take cover and were therefore a much smaller target. Team Orange had to stand. Firing one shot took them much longer, which is historically accurate, and this is why Blue won.
On the 19th century battlefield, the breech-loading technique still has a few kinks, but soon turns out to be a pioneer development. Only the generals still have their reservations.
You have to imagine the generals as very conservative people. Never change a winning team, never change a winning weapon. They were also worried that introducing new gun systems like the Dreyse Needle Gun would make the ammunition use skyrocket, paradoxically, because it could fire quickly, and that this would incur enormous costs.
The Battle of Königgrätz in 1866, however, puts any doubts to rest. A wooden hill known as a Sweep Forest is a key position for the Prussians.
The Prussians entrenched themselves in a forest. They took advantage of the benefit their breech-loading guns had over the muzzle loaders, the higher rate of fire, and they could be used from any position.
The longer reach of the Austrian muzzle loaders served no purpose on the ground in Königgrätz. The battle claims an unusually large number of victims. The Prussians fire their Dreyse guns from their cover. By nightfall, 13,000 Austrians are dead or missing. The Prussians only lose about 2,000 men.
So this becomes the battle-winning weapon in 1866, and it transforms the way the rest of the world looks at infantry firepower. All of a sudden, there's a new way of fighting with infantry, and it involves breech-loading rifled weapons.
Fundamental changes of battlefield tactics can almost always be traced back to new weapons technology. It is mostly up to the generals to make the next call. How do I use my units best? The 17th century serves as an example of this. The bayonet replaces the pike and leads to the introduction of what is called line formation. Infantry units form in line in 2 to 3 ranks. Such ranks of soldiers can be up to 1,000 meters long. On command, all weapons are fired simultaneously with fatal blows, known as volley fire.
Infantry battles in the age of the musket were fought by platoons, regiments, and whole armies of men standing in 2 and 3 lines, exchanging volleys of leveled fire, not aimed fire. Soldiers were not trained to aim at the enemy, they were trained to level, to point their musket dead ahead towards the enemy. And you fired as many rounds as possible, as quickly as possible, hoping that you would do more damage to the enemy than they would do to you. Precision was not an issue. This was about masses of bullets being fired as quickly as possible.
The rate of fire of the Dreyse Needle Gun will change that. Battles become more mobile. Soldiers take cover and shoot at the enemy forces in a targeted way. Another development fosters the change in tactics. The dense smoke of black powder looms over the battlefields well into the 19th century. French chemist Paul Vier invents a new gunpowder in 1884. The poudre B is almost smokeless. Generals can keep track of things more easily now and coordinate movements on the battlefield. The Dreyse Needle Gun and poudre B move Europe's battles from open fields into cover. Soon after, automatic weapons promote a further change in military tactics. They result in camouflage uniforms and trenches. Movement during battle, therefore, becomes increasingly dangerous. Another reason for this is that an old design can now be manufactured at an industrial scale, the landmine. El Alamein, Egypt, 1942. The German Afrika Corps under their commander Erwin Rommel has pushed through Tunisia and reached Egypt. British troops are intending to stop the German advance near El Alamein, about 100 kilometers from Alexandria. Desert battlefield offers virtually no cover and therefore lends itself perfectly for the use of landmines. Both sides deploy countless of these hidden explosive devices. They hide more than 17 million landmines in the sand.
The modern landmine was invented as part of a defensive system to prevent the enemy attacking. Rather like the medieval caltrop, it's an anti-attack system.
The British mine belt limits Rommel's tank troops severely. They also lack supplies and air support. The battle comes to an end in autumn 1942. The Germans have to retreat. 6 months later, Hitler loses his war in North Africa for good. To this day, the legacy of this campaign lies deep within the North African desert. Experts estimate that about 1/5 of the landmines buried worldwide lie in the desert area around the Libyan-Egyptian border. Clearing these old minefields costs millions.
The purpose of landmines is to stop the enemy using a piece of ground, and that works both as an absolute barrier, but it can also work as a channel. You create minefields which oblige the enemy to go through a particular zone where you may have targeted all of your artillery, where you may be ready with other forms of defense to meet their attack.
Landmines become an efficient means to slow down the enemy's approach in World War II. The deadly legacy of this tactic claims victims in the former war zones to this day. Weapons expert Stephen Bull wants to learn more about this weapon that cost hundreds of thousands of their lives in the 20th century.
So this is a Second World War type anti-personnel mine. One of the most vicious weapons ever invented. This is a bouncing Betty, the sort of weapon everybody wants to ban now.
The bouncing Betty is a bouncing mine. Like in most landmines, its detonator is triggered by pressure. After a short delay, the mine body is launched into the air and detonates at a height of about 1 meter. This magnifies the effect of the mine.
But what made mines possible was the fuses, the ways they were initiated. And this is a surprisingly long story.
The story dates back to the 11th century in China. The Chinese find out that a mixture of nitrate, charcoal, and sulfur carries explosive powers. Gunpowder is born. It is immediately used by the military. In 1368, the predecessor of the landmine makes its debut in Inner Mongolia. The Yuan dynasty is fighting against the Ming dynasty for power over the empire. The explosive devices consist of hollowed-out containers weighing 1.7 kilogram. A special type of fuse triggers off the explosion. Black powder wrapped in thin silk paper. Easy to make, but not reliable.
One of the major problems with those mines were their detonators. They weren't very reliable, didn't go off, or sometimes went off at the wrong moment. The black powder used in the mines posed another problem. It absorbs humidity, and wet black powder renders the mine useless.
In the centuries that follow, concealed explosives are used many times to defend forts and castles. But the attackers are now also using such weapons. In fact, they give their mines their name. The time-consuming yet devastating siege war attack tactic requires soldiers who are also engineers. The idea: building a tunnel or a mine underneath the enemy's fortification walls, fill it up with explosives and make it blast. The Turks do this in a particularly effective manner during the siege of Vienna in 1529. Several times Vienna is close to being conquered thanks to the work of the Ottoman sappers. Their explosives cause substantial damage to the walls of the Austrian capital. The defenders are forced to come up with countermeasures. They set up listening posts to detect vibrations created by the mining of the tunnels. If they find a Turkish mine tunnel, the defenders fill it up with water or attack the enemy underground using close combat fighters. This mining technique is still used in World War I. In 1917, British pioneers blast 19 tunnel mines with up to 600 tons of explosives under the German emplacements in Flanders, Belgium. The detonations claimed the lives of roughly 10,000 German soldiers. Afterwards, the British troops could start assaults on the parts of the front line that have been hit. The development of landmines featuring an automatic ignition, however, drags on for quite some time. As early as the mid-16th century, gunsmith Samuel Zimmermann from Augsburg, Germany, develops a mechanical system for self-detonating mines. He combines the ignition mechanism of a musket with an explosive. The weapon seems to have enormous potential, but it is not reliable and cannot be produced on a large scale. In 1862, landmines play a big military role in the American Civil War. Confederate troops under Brigadier General Gabriel J. Rains bury large numbers of landmines with simple mechanical fuses in the Battle of Yorktown.
It's essentially a weapon of the defense. It's a relatively simple weapon, and because the Confederacy is on the defensive, it's much more effective for them than the Union, which is largely an offensive army.
Most of the Confederate mines do not go off. Unionists use captives to detect the insidious explosive devices. Landmines are no battle-winning weapons yet. The black powder is not weatherproof. The fuse mechanism is too unreliable. In 1867, Alfred Nobel from Sweden contributes to making landmines much more reliable. After countless setbacks, he eventually develops an explosive that is far less failure-prone than black powder, but also releases more energy. The name of his invention, dynamite.
The great innovation was that Alfred Nobel managed to stabilize the explosive, preventing it from igniting accidentally. This made it easier to store, transport, and produce dynamite on a large scale, so he basically found a way to keep up with the growing demands of the weapons industry.
The great powers start manufacturing large quantities of landmines. Due to the high demand in World War I, production figures see a sudden peak during this time. Between the two world wars, newly improved mine types are developed. In World War II, plenty of them are used, mostly in the Soviet Union and in North Africa. Historians estimate that about 300 million tank mines and a significantly larger number of smaller anti-personnel mines were deployed. Weapons expert Stephen Bull wants to conduct a test on a training area. Which tactic did the troops use?
Most landmines are set off by pressure. A cap or detonator is crushed and the mine explodes. The amount of pressure required varies according to purpose. Anti-personnel mines require very little pressure, an anti-tank mine an awful lot of pressure.
The T-42 is an anti-tank mine with a diameter of 32 centimeters and a height of 10 centimeters. Its trigger weight, 210 kilograms. The S-35 is an anti-personnel mine with a diameter of only 10 centimeters. 3 kilos are enough to set off the pressure fuse mechanism. Stephen Bull kicks off the experiment. 11 assistants have to plant landmines into the ground in accordance with a plan used in World War II.
So welcome to my trainee mine technicians. Our job today is to lay a minefield across this track. 2 mines a person, and move away to the left. Thank you.
Stephen Bull is following the technical manual 514/4 of German Armed Forces for the placement of mines.
So I'm going to give you numbers, and please remember your numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And I'd like you to move into position at 2-meter intervals right on the far side of this track. Do you understand?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, please take your positions. So, I would like odd numbers to take 1 pace into the track and prepare to lay your mines. Even numbers, stay where you are, please. So now we're going to dig a hole about 10 centimeters deep, so just the top part of the mine is showing above the ground. Whatever you do not remove the pin yet. We are going to remove the pins to activate the mines at the end of our job. Okay?
Our dummy mines basically work like anti-personnel mines, only that the fuse mechanism doesn't set off an explosion, but rather a colored cloud. Soon the mines are hidden in the ground, each spaced out at a distance of 1.5 meters width and 1 meter length from each other. These patterns are intended to form a barrier that is as impenetrable as possible. Anti-tank mines are placed in 3 consecutive rows, only 1 to 2 meters apart from each other. The chances of crossing these lines unharmed are very slim. In the largest mine battle of World War II in El Alamein, Egypt, both sides used several millions of mines. Erwin Rommel, who has undergone special mine clearing training, has his men plant what is called Devil's Gardens, a maze of minefields arranged like a horseshoe. It is easy to drive into them, but almost impossible to escape from when under fire. British tank drivers dreaded this tactic. Weapons expert Stephen Bull wants to find out if it is possible to cross a minefield. So he put the assistants into 2 groups. One group has planted the mines. Without knowing the pattern, the other group will now have to get to the other side unharmed.
If anybody has a weak heart, they should tell me now. Everybody feels fit and well?
Yes. Yes.
The second group doesn't know yet that the track is riddled with mines.
Are we okay? Let's go! Quickly, quickly! Oh! Stop, stop, stop! You're in a minefield, stop! That certainly gave a few people surprises.
Only 2 meters into the field, 2 mines go off. In reality, the explosive power would have at the very least caused severe harm to everyone.
I just heard it, but I got so scared that I just had to run faster and faster.
The first instinct was to run fast, to stay alive.
Oh!
The perfidious thing about landmines is that they are invisible for the enemy. This aspect weighs heavily on the soldiers' minds.
There is no protection because you know that each centimeter is potentially dangerous. And in this case, because I was the last man, I just blindly followed the others and hoped I would get lucky.
There is a serious message here, and that is how dangerous mines were on the battlefield and their effect of slowing armies down, of causing panic, of causing occasional casualties. It all adds up to an effective, nasty, and cunning weapon.
Planting mines is relatively easy and inexpensive. Clearing a minefield, on the other hand, is all the more difficult. In the aftermath of asymmetrical conflicts and civil wars, perilous minefields often pose problems because there are no maps indicating where they have been placed.
There are still landmines in the Falkland Islands from the 1982 war. All over southern Africa, there are landmines in post-colonial conflicts. They're in Vietnam. People are still being killed by landmines.
There are several techniques to clear minefields. Besides manual methods with detectors, animals can also help, like specially trained rats. If it is financially feasible, machines can also do this dangerous job. According to estimates of the UN, more than 100 million landmines were still buried worldwide in the mid-1990s. Celebrities also get involved in the fight against mines, like Lady Diana. In August 1997, she visits mine victims in Bosnia-Herzegovina. In December 1997, the international community reaches an historic agreement. 121 states signed the Ottawa Treaty, the Convention on the Prohibition of Anti-Personnel Mines. 32 states still have yet to sign the convention to this day. Among them are North and South Korea, India, Israel, Russia, and the US.
The problem with the ban is it's not universal. The kinds of people who would have used mines in the past are highly unlikely to stop using them now. If the circumstances are right, people will use these things because they work.
The relics of past wars still claim victims today. Every 20 to 30 minutes, someone steps onto a landmine somewhere in the world. An age-old principle lethally improved by modern technology, deployed countless times as a result of industrial manufacturing. Landmines, invisible killers. The race to the perfect attack from cover is likely to become increasingly essential in the future. New techniques are being developed that aim at concealing anything from the enemy's eyes, even tanks. Special camouflage systems for vehicles already exist. They make vehicles invisible, at least to infrared cameras. This is possible thanks to thermal reflectors that change their temperature within the blink of an eye. You need 1,000 of these panels in order to make a tank disappear. Sensors on board create a heat image that matches the surroundings. More like a chameleon than a traditional tank. Comparable stealth technology for soldiers is already being developed. The next generation of attacks from cover.